Roselle has ruled the NFL with an iron hand. He was the driving force behind the merger in 1966, and although many of his decisions have been questioned, his integrity and knack for diplomacy have served him and the NFL very well. 2 decades ago, professional football was, relatively speaking, a shoestring operation. A few clubs made money, others were perennial losers. In his 18 years as commissioner, Pete Roselle has turned the NFL into a very successful business. He unified the league and helped it realize its potential in a television-dominated sports world. Roselle was a surprise choice as commissioner. He was the 33-year-old general manager of the Rams when the owners met to choose a successor to the late Bert Bell.
I was representing the Rams with Dan Reeves, who was then the president of the club. And, gee, we went, I don't know, about 10 days and had 22 different ballots. And everyone got entrenched. And I guess everyone was ready for a compromise. And I was as surprised as the media and everyone else when they elected me commissioner.
When you first took the job as commissioner, what problems did you see and how did you attack them?
Well, the first big problem involved television because all the clubs were negotiating their own contracts. And so we were competing with ourselves. And some clubs were going to lose out on television altogether. So we had to find a way of pooling television, selling it in a package so that everyone could, get a good amount of money.
1963, Alex Karras and Paul Hornung were involved in the betting scandal, and you had to suspend them. Reflect upon that a little bit.
Well, that's the toughest part of this job, the disciplinary aspects of it. We never had evidence, and I'm sure that, on Hornung and Karras, that either bet against his own team. They made relatively small bets on their own teams, but they were doing it quite a bit during the season. And it's a firm rule, of course, a player rule, that they won't be involved in gambling on professional football. So I'll never forget when we researched it, and I called Vince Lombardi because I knew he was so close to Paul. And Paul and Vinny came in the office, flew in from Green Bay, so I wanted to see him. So I laid this out in front of Vince, and it really impressed me, his stature as a man, his reaction, because he looked at the information, and he says, "You don't have any choice, do you?" Rather than being a coach and saying, "Look, this isn't so bad, forget about it." He knew what the problem was, how it could affect the league. So that's what all he said. He said, "You have no choice. Let's go get a drink." And I said, "All right."
President Kennedy died, and the NFL did not decide to cancel the games for that weekend. Do you feel that was a mistake?
Sure. It was a very difficult period, and there was no schedule laid out for services for President Kennedy. And I remember on the Saturday, I finally got in touch with someone I'd gone to school with, who was the president's press secretary, Pierre Salinger, who's still a good friend of mine. And he'd been out in the Pacific and was en route back, and I think I got him in Hawaii. And I said, here it is Saturday. We don't know when the funeral is going to be. We don't know what's going to happen. We've got clubs flying all over the country. And Pierre at that time told me, well, I think the service is going to be the first part of the week, and I don't know what else you can do. But obviously, I feel it was a mistake. I wish that we had not played the games.
Pete Roselle is not without his critics. Ed Garvey, head of the Players Association, is a longtime opponent. And Al Davis, who once led the American Football League, isn't a charter member of the Roselle fan club either. But the majority of owners, including the ones who questioned his ability in the beginning, think he's doing a good job.
His negotiations with the members of the media, particularly television, has been an outstanding in a most difficult job, and he rises to the challenge day after day.
This year, some interesting changes were made. We went to the 16-game season as opposed to a 14-game season. Did you worry about overexposure prior to the start of the season?
Yes, which is why we sacrificed money on our night games. At the NFL's discretion, we could have 6 of those specials, a minimum of 4, a maximum of 6. We went with 4, those Sunday night games and Thursday. And I think we'll stay at 4 next year, too, rather than going 6 and getting additional money. You have to watch overexposure, but we have constantly. The best barometers are attendance figures and television ratings.
When problems do arise, it's not uncommon for Roselle to turn to his wife, Carrie.
He has incredible patience, and he's most remarkable. I envy him the patience. But the thing that I find that happens if he's had a difficult day is he smokes 3 packages of cigarettes during that day, and he walks the floor at night. And I don't think either of those things are very good for him. So I'm concerned about his health.
How did you two meet?
We met on a tennis court. Actually, we met at Super Bowl VII, and it was a brief meeting. And during the following week, Pete was still in Los Angeles, and a friend of mine needed a 4th for tennis, called me, and she said, "I think you'll like your partner." And I went over, and I liked him a lot. And I immediately started to chase him, but he didn't know it. Caught him, too.
What has happened to you as a person over these last 18 years?
I've grown 18 years older, and sometimes I think more than that. I've enjoyed it. I think all of us in sports who are able to make a living from something that we so genuinely enjoy are just very fortunate.